"Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash." Cynthia Bradshaw screamed this as her white BMW X5 barreled toward my pregnant heifers. The sound of her horn, a shrill European bleat completely alien to the quiet of my pasture, ripped through the calm morning air like a gunshot. My cattle, usually as placid as a summer pond, jolted in panic. They were Angus, bred for temperament as much as for beef. But a 2-ton bull will still move when a city predator decides to use her vehicle as a weapon. She thought because she drove a luxury SUV with a logo that cost more than my first truck and ran the new HOA for the ticky-tacky mansions sprouting up on the horizon, she owned my land. She was about to learn that in Texas, the deed is king. The paper in my safe, brittle with age, and signed by my great-grandfather in 1940, held more power than her bank account, her fake polite smile, and her entire army of lawyers she was so fond of threatening me with. I spent $52,000 on concrete just to watch her life fall apart. And honestly, standing there, watching her face contort with impotent rage as the first concrete truck rumbled past her grand opening sign, I knew it was worth every single penny. Before her, life on the Riverside Ranch had a rhythm. It was a cadence set by the sun and the seasons, not by a developer's schedule. 50 acres of rolling Texas hill country, with a creek that cut through the south pasture and willows that wept so low, their branches brushed the water. My family had worked this land since before the Big War, when my great-grandfather bought it with every dollar he had in a handshake. He passed it to my granddad, who passed it to my father, and then my father, his hands worn and calloused but his eyes clear, passed it to me. It wasn't just dirt and grass. It was a living thing, a repository of memory. I could stand on the porch of the house my granddad built and feel them all there watching over the place. The smell of the earth after rain, the lowing of the herd at dusk, the weight of the old iron gate under my hand. These things were my inheritance, more valuable than any stock portfolio. My wife, Sarah, she wasn't born to this life, but she took to it like she was. A high school science teacher in the nearby town of Liberty Crossing, she had a pragmatist's mind and a deep well of patience. She understood the ranch wasn't a business to me, not really. It was a duty. It paid its own way, sure. My prize Angus bulls, especially my big boy Blackjack, brought in serious money from other breeders looking to improve their genetics. We sold calves every year. It was a good living, but the money was just the means to an end. The end was preserving this piece of Texas, this piece of my family's soul, for another generation. Our mornings were a ritual of coffee on the porch swing, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink over the tops of the live oaks. The quiet was the point. It was a sacred thing. Then came the noise. It started as a distant rumble, the sound of earth-moving equipment. A developer had bought the 200-acre parcel of overgrazed scrubland that bordered my eastern fence line. For months, the air was filled with the groan of bulldozers and the incessant beeping of trucks in reverse. A massive, gaudy sign went up. Willow Creek Estates. Luxury living with an authentic ranch vista. My authentic ranch vista now included the skeletal frames of a dozen oversized houses that all looked identical, like a row of cheap Monopoly pieces. I didn't like it, but it was their land. I believe in property rights, even for people with terrible taste. I figured a fence makes a good neighbor, and mine was sturdy. The first time I saw her, she was just a flash of white and chrome. Her BMW X5 kicked up a plume of dust on the county road, driving far too fast. She didn't slow for the turn onto the new paved street leading into her development, just swung the wheel with an arrogance that said the road belonged to her. I was mending a stretch of fence near the road and I tipped my hat, the way you do out here. It's a simple acknowledgement. I see you. We're neighbors. She stared straight ahead, her sunglasses like two black holes in her perfectly coiffed blonde head, and blew right past me. I just shook my head and went back to stretching wire. The bad feeling like the air gets before a norther blows in settled in my gut. A few weeks later, the real trouble began. My main access to the back pastures and the creek was a private dirt road that ran along the edge of my property, parallel to the new development. It was clearly, unequivocally mine. The original survey from 1940 showed it. My deed described it, and for 80 years it had been used for one thing: moving Mercer cattle and equipment. I was bringing a small group of heifers, all pregnant with valuable calves sired by Blackjack, from the south pasture up to the pens near the barn. It's a slow process. You don't rush pregnant cows. You guide them. You talk to them. You let them move at their own pace. That's when her white BMW appeared at the far end of my road, having turned off the main county road and onto my land. She wasn't just driving. She was flying. I saw the cloud of dust long before I could make out the car. I immediately moved my horse to the middle of the road and raised my hand, signaling for her to stop. She didn't slow down until she was right on top of me, braking hard and sending a spray of gravel skittering across the dirt. The heifers, startled, bunched up nervously behind me. She rolled down her window, the scent of some expensive cloying perfume washing over me. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice even. My horse, Patches, shifted nervously beneath me, sensing my tension. "Yes, you can move your livestock," she said, not as a request, but as a command. Her voice was smooth, but had an edge of impatience. "Some of us have places to be." "Ma'am, this is a private road," I explained, gesturing with my hand to the fields on either side. "This is part of my ranch. The entrance to your development is a quarter-mile back that way." She gave a little tinkling laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, bless your heart," she said, dripping condescension. It's the kind of phrase a woman like her uses to call you an idiot without actually saying the word. "I'm Cynthia Bradshaw, the developer for Willow Creek. I'm sure this is just a little misunderstanding. This road is the most direct route for my residents to get to the old highway." "It may be direct, but it's not public," I said, my patience starting to fray. I pointed to the faded but still legible sign nailed to a post, right where the road met the county blacktop. It read, in no uncertain terms, "Riverside Ranch, private drive, no trespassing." She glanced at it and scoffed, a little puff of air. "Oh, that old thing. Don't worry about it. We'll have it taken down. It's an eyesore anyway. Now, if you'll excuse me." She put the car in drive. I didn't move my horse. "No, ma'am, I don't think you understand. You are trespassing. You need to turn around and use the entrance to your subdivision." Her face hardened, the fake polite mask cracking. "I don't have time for this." She revved the engine, a low growl. My horse sidestepped. The heifers behind me started to get agitated, their lowing taking on an anxious pitch. "Turn the car around," I said, my voice low and flat. There was no more ma'am. For a long moment, we were locked in a stalemate. The sun beat down, the air thick with the smell of dust, perfume, and nervous cattle. Finally, with a theatrical sigh, she slammed the car into reverse and backed up, her tires spitting gravel. She didn't go back to the county road, though. She just backed up far enough to whip the car around in a tight, angry circle, tearing up the grass on the shoulder before speeding back the way she came. I watched her go, a knot tightening in my stomach. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a declaration. That brought us to this morning, the confrontation that changed everything. I was moving the same group of pregnant heifers again, this time to a pasture with better shade as the summer heat intensified. I'd seen her BMW parked in front of one of the nearly finished houses, so I thought I was in the clear. I was wrong. She must have been watching, waiting. She came down that dirt road even faster than before. This time, I didn't have time to get my horse in front. She was aiming for the herd, and she was laying on the horn. That's when she screamed it, the window down, her face a mask of fury. "Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash!" Panic exploded through the herd. They scattered. Cows aren't built for quick, agile movements, especially not when they're heavy with calf. One of my best heifers, a gentle girl I called Dolly, tried to pivot away from the noise and the charging vehicle. Her legs went out from under her. She went down hard, a terrible, clumsy fall, letting out a cry of pain. The rest of the herd stampeded, crashing through a section of fence into a pasture they weren't supposed to be in. My blood ran cold, then hot. All I could see was red. I spurred Patches, galloping past her now stopped BMW and toward Dolly, who was struggling to get up. I dismounted, my heart pounding, running a hand down her leg. It wasn't broken, thank God, but she was favoring it badly, and I could see a dark, wet patch spreading on her hindquarters. A sign of premature labor. This was a potential 5-figure loss, not to mention the life of a calf and the health of its mother. I got the rest of the herd calmed down and corralled, my mind a storm of rage. Then I walked, very slowly, back to her car. She was still sitting there, a smug look on her face, like she just won something. I stopped at her driver's side window. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. "You listen to me," I said, and my voice was as cold and hard as winter granite. "You just endangered my animals. You just cost me thousands of dollars, potentially. You are on my land. This is the last time I am telling you. Stay off my property. The next time you come through my gate, you'll be dealing with the sheriff. Do you understand me?" She looked at me, at the fury I knew was burning in my eyes, and for the first time, a flicker of something other than entitlement crossed her face. It might have been fear, but it was quickly replaced by that familiar sneer. "You can't threaten me," she hissed. "I have lawyers." "I don't make threats," I said. "I make promises." I turned my back on her and walked away to tend to my injured animal. I didn't look back, but I heard her gun the engine and tear off, leaving me in a cloud of dust and fury. The war had begun. That evening, after the vet had come and gone, confirming Dolly was in distress but stable for now, I sat down with Sarah at the kitchen table. I laid it all out for her. The speeding, the trespassing, the confrontation, the injured heifer. Sarah listened quietly, her brow furrowed with worry. She'd seen the development go up, heard the whispers in town about the aggressive new developer. "That woman is a menace, Clay," she said, her hand covering mine on the worn oak of the table. "What are we going to do? A lawsuit could drag on for years and cost a fortune." "I'm not suing her, not yet," I said, my mind already working. "I'm going to start with something simpler, something undeniable." I stood up and walked to the mudroom, retrieving a brand new, heavy-gauge logging chain and the biggest, meanest-looking padlock I owned. "Tomorrow morning, I'm locking the gate, and I'm adding a few more signs. Big ones. No one, not even her, can claim they didn't see it." Sarah watched me, her teacher's mind analyzing the problem. "She seems like the type to just cut it, Clay." "I know," I said, the grim reality of it settling in. "And when she does, I'll be ready." I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app. From now on, I'm documenting everything, every tire track, every broken lock, every word she says. If this goes to court, I'm not going to be the one who looks unreasonable. The next morning, before the sun had even crested the hills, I was at the gate. I wrapped the thick chain through the gatepost and the gate itself, pulling it tight. I snapped the heavy padlock shut. The click echoed in the quiet air, a sound of finality. Then I got out my post hole digger and hammer. I sank 2 new wooden posts, one on either side of the entrance, and nailed up large, professionally printed metal signs. One was a classic, "Private property. Keep out." The other was more specific. "This is not a public road. Access to Willow Creek Estates is via Willow Creek Drive. Trespassers will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." It was clear, concise, and legally unambiguous. I took a dozen pictures from every angle, time-stamped. It didn't even last 24 hours. I rode out on patrol the next morning, a sick feeling in my stomach. I saw it from 100 yards away. The gate was swung wide open. The heavy chain was lying in the dirt, a single link, neatly and powerfully severed. My brand new padlock was gone, probably tossed in the ditch somewhere, as a final act of contempt. Fresh tire tracks, The distinctive pattern of her high-performance SUV tires were pressed into the dirt, leading onto my road and off into the distance. She hadn't even tried to hide it. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. She hadn't just trespassed. She had committed criminal mischief, destruction of property. I dismounted, my hands clenching into fists. I forced myself to calm down, to follow the procedure I'd set for myself. I took out my phone. I photographed the cut chain from multiple angles, showing the clean slice from a pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters. I photographed the tire tracks. I photographed the open gate against the backdrop of my new, ignored signs. I saved the evidence, my digital folder of Cynthia Bradshaw's sins growing. The polite phase was officially over. She had escalated this from a dispute to a campaign of harassment. And I was beginning to realize that to beat a woman like her, I had to think like her. I had to figure out what her weakness was. The answer came, as it often does in a small town, through the mail. My mailman Eddie had been delivering mail on this route since I was a kid. He knew my father, and his father knew my grandfather. Eddie was a talker, the central nervous system of the community, and he was fiercely loyal to the old families. He pulled his little white truck up to my mailbox a few days later, but instead of just stuffing the mail in and driving off, he got out and leaned against the fence, waiting for me as I rode up. "Got something you need to see, Clay?" he said, his voice low. He looked around as if expecting Cynthia to pop out from behind a bush. He reached into his mailbag and pulled out a glossy, tri-fold brochure. The front was a picture of a smiling, impossibly perfect family having a picnic, with the skeletal houses of Willow Creek Estates in the background. The headline read, "Willow Creek Estates, where luxury meets legacy." "She's handing these out to everyone who so much as looks at one of her lots," Eddie whispered, flipping it open. He pointed to a map of the development printed inside. My stomach dropped. There, highlighted in a pleasant, welcoming green, was my private dirt road. It was labeled, in an elegant script, the Ranch View Access Road, an exclusive amenity for residents. Below the map, in the bulleted list of features, it was right there between gourmet kitchens with granite countertops and community pool and clubhouse. It read, "Private, scenic shortcut to Old Highway 12, offering authentic ranch views." I took the brochure from him, my fingers tight on the glossy paper. It was worse than I thought. She wasn't just using my road, she was selling it. She was committing blatant, undeniable fraud, using my property as a marketing tool to inflate the value of her own. She was baking a lie into the very foundation of her development. "That ain't all," Eddie said, leaning closer. "I hear things. Her ex-husband took her to the cleaners in the divorce. She's leveraged up to her eyeballs on this project. Word is, if she can't sell this first phase of houses fast and for top dollar, the bank's going to pull her financing." And there it was, the final piece of the puzzle. This wasn't just about arrogance or convenience. It was about desperation. She had built her entire financial survival on a foundation of lies, and my private road was the cornerstone of that lie. If that road was taken away from her buyers, the contract she was getting them to sign, which likely listed that access as a guaranteed amenity, could be voided. She wouldn't just be embarrassed, she'd be bankrupt. That's when I knew I had her. She thought she was fighting a battle over a dirt road. I was about to turn it into a war for her very existence. The next phase of her attack was more insidious. She stopped cutting the lock. I had replaced the chain with an even heavier one, and started using the phone. The first official visit was from Deputy Miller, a young guy from the county sheriff's office. He pulled up looking apologetic. "Morning, Clay. Got a call about a public access obstruction." I just nodded and invited him to the porch. I had a file folder ready on the table. "Morning, Miller. Coffee?" I poured him a cup and laid it all out. I started with the deed from 1940. Then I showed him the county survey map, which I'd gone and gotten a fresh, certified copy of. I showed him the pictures of the new signs, the cut chain, the BMW tire tracks. I explained that Mrs. Bradshaw was falsely advertising my road as part of her development. Miller, who grew up on a farm himself, understood deeds and property lines. He traced the boundary on the map with his finger. Well, it's clear as day, Clay. This is your road. Always has been. He took a sip of coffee. She's claiming it's a prescriptive easement, that it's been used by the public for so long it's become public by default. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. The only public that's ever used this road for the last 80 years has been my cows. And they ain't talking. He nodded, finishing his coffee. All right. I'll go have a chat with her and explain the legal reality. I'll file a report stating the claim is unfounded. But you be careful. This feels like it's going to get uglier. He was right. A week later, a shiny sedan with government plates pulled up. 2 people in crisp shirts, a man and a woman, got out, holding clipboards. Environmental Protection Agency. Mr. Mercer, we've received an anonymous complaint regarding improper disposal of agricultural waste and potential contamination of Willow Creek. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Willow Creek ran through my property, miles upstream from her development. If anything was contaminating it, it was her bulldozers. But I played the part of the concerned, cooperative citizen. Of course, let me show you my operation. I spent the next 2 hours walking them through my ranch. I showed them my manure management plan, which was fully compliant with state and federal regulations. I showed them my rotational grazing system, designed specifically to prevent soil erosion and runoff. I showed them the wide, grassy buffers I maintained along the creek banks, a voluntary measure that went above and beyond the requirements. The EPA agents were professionals. They took samples, they looked at my records, and they could clearly see this was a well-managed, responsible operation. The woman finally looked at me, a hint of exasperation in her eyes. Mr. Mercer, your ranch is a model of environmental stewardship. I have no idea why this complaint was filed. I'm sorry to have wasted your time. I just smiled. No trouble at all. Glad to show you around. I took a picture of them driving away too. Another piece of evidence. The trifecta of harassment was completed the following Monday by a visit from the state health inspector. Another anonymous tip. This one was about diseased livestock being sold to market. This was a low blow, a direct attack on my livelihood and reputation. My vet, Doc Jensen, happened to be on site for his regular monthly checkup. Doc Jensen was in his 70s and had forgotten more about cattle health than most vets ever learn. When the inspector, a young woman who looked barely out of college, nervously explained her purpose, Doc Jensen let out a wheezing laugh. Diseased livestock. Ma'am, Clay Mercer's Angus are some of the healthiest, best documented animals in the entire state of Texas. You're welcome to look, but you're going to be bored. For an hour, the inspector reviewed my vaccination records, my genetic testing results, my Coggins tests. Everything was in perfect, immaculate order. She left, red-faced and apologizing profusely. Each visit was a victory, but a draining one. Cynthia was using taxpayer-funded agencies as her own personal harassment squad. She was trying to bury me in paperwork and bureaucracy, hoping I'd get tired and just give her what she wanted. She fundamentally misunderstood the nature of a man who works the same land his great-grandfather did. We don't get tired. We get resolved. Then came the lawsuit. I wasn't entirely surprised when the process server, a skinny kid with a nervous twitch, found me by the barn. He handed me a thick envelope. You've been served. I opened it right there. It was a civil suit filed by Cynthia Bradshaw and the Willow Creek Estates HOA. They were suing me for maliciously blocking a historical public easement, seeking damages for the devaluation of their property, and requesting an immediate injunction to force me to remove my gate. It was pure fiction, a legal document woven from lies and wishful thinking. But it was still a lawsuit. It required a response. It required a lawyer. It required money. I called Sarah. She did it, I said. She's suing us. The next day, I was in the office of Arthur Miller, a lawyer who had been handling land disputes in our county for 50 years. He was a cantankerous old badger of a man with a shock of white hair and a deep-seated distrust of anyone who drove a German car. He read through the lawsuit, his expression unchanging. Then he looked at the folder of evidence I'd brought. The deed, the survey, the photos of the cut chain, the reports from the sheriff and the EPA, the fraudulent marketing brochure. A slow grin spread across Miller's face. "Well, son," he drawled, leaning back in his creaky leather chair, "this is the most baseless, pathetic, and downright laughable piece of legal malpractice I've seen since that fella tried to sue the county because a squirrel stole his dentures. She has absolutely no case. Zero. Zilch. Nada." "So we can get it dismissed?" I asked, a wave of relief washing over me. "Oh, eventually," Miller said, waving a dismissive hand, "but not before she makes us jump through a bunch of expensive hoops. We'll have to file a response, go through discovery, probably a few hearings. She's trying to bleed you dry, hoping you'll give in before it gets to a judge." "But what she doesn't realize," he said, tapping my folder of evidence, "is that we're not just going to defend. We're going to countersue for legal fees, for damages to your property, for slander of title, and for fraudulent business practices. We're going to make her regret the day she ever learned what a lawsuit was." The cost was still going to be significant up front, but leaving Miller's office, I felt a weight lift. I had the truth, and I had a bulldog of a lawyer who loved a good fight. The victory seemed inevitable, even if it was distant. Cynthia, however, wasn't content to fight her war in the courtroom alone. She took it public. A news van from a regional station appeared at the entrance to Willow Creek one afternoon. I saw them setting up, and then I saw Cynthia, dressed in a sharp business suit, her face a carefully constructed mask of sorrowful concern. A reporter I recognized from the evening news ambushed me as I was heading out to check my fences. The camera light flicked on, bright and invasive. "Mr. Mercer," the reporter called out, shoving a microphone in my face. "Rhonda Clark, Channel 8 News. Can you tell our viewers why you're holding a new community of families hostage over an old dirt road?" I was blindsided. "Hostage," I said, trying to keep my composure. "This is my private property." The camera swung over to Cynthia, who stepped forward, dabbing at a perfectly dry eye. "We've tried to be neighborly," she said, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "We represent progress, community. We have families who just want a safe, direct route for their children. All we've asked for is a little bit of that old Texas spirit of sharing, and all we've received is hostility and threats." It was a masterful performance. She was the victim, the visionary. I was the villain, the stubborn, backward redneck clinging to the past. The reporter turned back to me, her expression skeptical. "Mr. Mercer, your response?" I looked straight into the camera. I didn't look at Cynthia. I didn't look at the reporter. I looked at the people who would be watching this at home. "This ranch has been in my family since 1940, I said, my voice steady. "That road has been private for every one of those years. This is not about sharing. This is about a developer who is illegally selling access to my land to make a profit. I have a right to protect my property, my family, and my livestock. The law is on my side, and the truth will come out." That night, we watched the broadcast. They used a 30-second clip, 10 seconds of her playing the victim, 5 seconds of my hostage comment, making me sound baffled and guilty, and then another 15 seconds of her talking about families and community. My reasoned statement was left on the cutting room floor. The piece ended with the reporter standing in front of my locked gate, calling it a symbol of the bitter dispute dividing this once peaceful community. I felt a hot flush of anger and helplessness. She was outmaneuvering me, painting me as the bad guy in my own story. Sarah put her arm around me. "They don't know the truth, Clay," she said softly. "We do. And that's what matters." I sat on the porch late into the night, the legal bills piling up on the table, the memory of that biased news report burning in my mind. I looked at the brochure from Eddie, the one promising exclusive access. I looked at the heavy chained gate, a battle line I had to defend every single day. She was betting everything, her money, her reputation, her future, on the idea that she could break me, that she could wear me down with lawyers and reporters and government inspectors until I just gave up. She thought paper threats and public shaming were the ultimate weapons. She was wrong. In this part of the world, some things are more permanent than paper. I turned to Sarah, who was sitting quietly in the swing beside me. She's trying to bleed us to death with 1,000 paper cuts, I said, my voice quiet but filled with a new, hard certainty. It's time to stop fighting her on her terms. It's time to create a fact on the ground, something she can't cut, can't sue, and can't lie her way around. Sarah looked at me, her eyes searching mine in the dim porch light. What are you going to do? I'm going to take $52,000 from the cattle fund, I said, the number sounding obscene and wonderful at the same time. I'm going to call Big Mike, and I'm going to build a wall. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. She didn't question the cost. She didn't ask if it was a good idea. She just saw the look in my eyes, the shift from defense to offense, and she knew it was the right move. You're planning something, she said, her voice full of a quiet strength that bolstered my own. Good. I picked up my phone. I didn't have to look up the number. I scrolled to M and hit the call button for Big Mike. He answered on the second ring, his voice a gravelly rumble. Yeah? Mike, it's Clay Mercer, I said. I've got a job for you, a big one. Big Mike's beat-up Ford F-250, a vehicle that looked like it had personally won a war against a mountain, rumbled up my drive the next afternoon. Big Mike himself was just as imposing as his truck. He was well over 6 feet tall with arms as thick as fence posts, a face weathered by decades of Texas sun, and a perpetual wad of chewing tobacco tucked in his cheek. He stepped out of the truck, hiked up his jeans, and spat a stream of brown juice into the dust. Heard you got a neighbor problem, he grunted by way of greeting. The worst kind, I said, shaking his massive, calloused hand. We walked over to the contested gate, the scene of the crime. I laid it all out for him. Not just a fence, I explained. I wanted a statement, a monument to property rights. I want a wall, Mike, I said, pointing. Starts here at this survey marker and runs the full 100-yard width of the entrance. I want it 12 feet high, steel-reinforced concrete footings and panels. I want it built right on my property line, not 1 inch over, not 1 inch back. And here, I said, pointing to the gate, I want a new gate system, custom-built, solid steel, on a cantilevered track so there's nothing on the ground to tamper with. I want it so heavy that a freight train would think twice about hitting it. Big Mike walked the line, scuffing the dirt with his boot. He looked at the flimsy, cut chain still lying on the ground. He looked over at the pristine, soulless houses of Willow Creek Estates. A slow, wicked grin spread across his face, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Clay, he said, I hate these entitled, new money HOA types. More than I hate fire ants in my boots. Building a wall to ruin one of their days is not just a job, it's a public service. Consider it done. We spent the next hour going over the details. The beauty of the plan was in its simplicity and its legality. Because my land was zoned for agriculture, what I was proposing wasn't a residential fence, which would be subject to all sorts of height and material restrictions. It was an agricultural security barrier. The permit process was a simple one-page form at the county clerk's office, designed for ranchers who needed to build heavy-duty containments for bulls or to prevent poaching. It was legally untouchable by an HOA or a neighboring developer. Cynthia would have no legal ground to stand on to stop it. It's going to be noisy and it's going to be messy, Mike warned, and it ain't going to be cheap. He scribbled some numbers on a notepad. The final figure came to $52,000, including the custom gate fabrication and installation. I didn't even blink. When can you start? Let me see, he said, pulling out a calendar. Looks like your neighbor lady is having some kind of big to-do this weekend. Banners are up all over town. Phase 2 grand opening. Be a real shame if a bunch of heavy equipment showed up and made a racket right in the middle of her party. He looked at me and winked. A real shame, I agreed. A genuine smile on my face for the first time in weeks. Let's plan on a Friday morning start. And Mike, I added, I'll be paying in cash. He spat another stream of tobacco. My favorite kind of job. The timing was, in a word, poetic. Cynthia had pulled out all the stops for her open house weekend. There were colorful banners flapping in the breeze, dozens of balloons tied to signs, and a big tent set up for refreshments. She was dressed in a crisp, white pantsuit, playing the role of the gracious and successful developer to the hilt. I saw a steady stream of expensive cars pulling into her development all Friday morning, prospective buyers ready to be wooed by her promises of luxury living. Then, at precisely 8 a.m., the ground began to shake. The first piece of Big Mike's army arrived, a massive excavator on a lowboy trailer, its engine a deep-throated diesel roar. It was followed by a bulldozer, and then the main event, a convoy of 6 concrete mixer trucks, their drums churning, lining up on the county road, waiting for their turn to enter my property. I was on my porch, coffee in hand, enjoying the show. I saw Cynthia's head snap around. Her perfectly curated sales pitch smile faltered, then vanished completely. Her face cycled through confusion, annoyance, and then blossomed into pure, unadulterated rage. She said something to her assistant and started marching, her heels sinking into the soft ground, straight for my property line where Big Mike's crew was already unloading the excavator. She started screaming before she was even close. What is the meaning of this? What do you think you're doing? You can't be here. You are blocking the access road. Her voice was shrill enough to curdle milk. Big Mike, who was directing the excavator operator, just turned slowly. He was a mountain of a man, and she was a tiny, furious hornet buzzing at him. He didn't say a word. He just pointed a massive, dirt-caked thumb back toward my porch. Cynthia spun around and saw me. She redirected her fury and stormed across the last few yards to the edge of my lawn. "You!" she shrieked. "What is this? Some kind of sick joke? I have a grand opening. You are ruining my business." This was the moment I'd been waiting for. I took a slow sip of my coffee and walked calmly to the edge of the porch. "Morning, Cynthia. Nice day for it." "Don't you nice day me, you peasant. This is a community easement. You can't block it. I will have you arrested," she shrieked, spittle flying from her lips. I just shook my head slowly. "You keep using that word, easement." "I don't think it means what you think it means," I said, enjoying the moment. I gestured with my coffee cup toward the line of bright orange survey flags that Big Mike's crew had meticulously planted that morning, marking my exact property line. "That line right there, that's my property line, confirmed by the county surveyor. Everything on this side is mine. And on my land, I'm building a wall, an agricultural security barrier to be precise. The permit is on file down at the county courthouse if you'd like to go check. It's perfectly legal. Now, if you'll excuse me, these gentlemen have a lot of concrete to pour." Her face went from red to a sort of blotchy purple. She was speechless, sputtering, like her expensive car when it's fed cheap gas. Her potential buyers were now gathering at the edge of her development, watching the drama unfold, their expressions a mixture of confusion and concern. The illusion of peaceful, luxurious, ranch-adjacent living was being shattered by the roar of a diesel engine and the sight of their developer having a complete meltdown. The construction was a glorious symphony of destruction for her and progress for me. All weekend, right through the heart of her open house, the sounds of my revenge filled the air. The beep, beep, beep of reversing trucks, the roar of the excavator digging the deep trench for the footings, the shouts of the work crew, and the constant churning groan of the concrete mixers. Buyers would pull up to her sales tent, and the first thing they'd see was a massive construction project, sealing off the exclusive road she had promised them. I saw her on the phone constantly, pacing back and forth like a caged animal, no doubt screaming at her lawyer, the county, anyone who would listen. She tried everything. She called the sheriff again. Deputy Miller showed up, took one look at the permit Big Mike handed him, and told her there was nothing he could do. "It's his land, ma'am. He can build on it." She tried to get a stop work order from a judge on Saturday morning, but Miller had already filed our response to her lawsuit, including a copy of the building permit. The emergency injunction was denied, Every avenue she turned down was a dead end. She was trapped, and the walls were literally closing in on her. The climax came on Sunday afternoon. The main concrete panels of the wall were up, a stark gray monolith stretching across the entrance. It was brutalist and beautiful. The only thing left was to remove the old, battered gate and install the new, custom-built steel behemoth that was now sitting on a flatbed, ready to be hoisted into place. For a brief period, the entrance was blocked only by the old gate I'd chained shut. The one she'd had cut open before. Cynthia had been watching from her sales tent all day, her face a thundercloud. The number of visiting cars had dwindled to almost none. Her grand opening was an abysmal failure, a public humiliation set to a soundtrack of concrete and steel. I guess something inside her just snapped. In a fit of what I can only describe as pure, desperate insanity, she got into her pristine white BMW X5. Her few remaining prospective buyers, who were trying to make a quiet exit, stopped and stared. She started the engine, revved it once, twice. The sound a high-pitched scream of frustration. She yelled something out the window, a wordless shriek of rage, and then she floored it. She wasn't aiming for the fields. She was aiming directly for my old gate. I suppose in her mind, she was going to make a grand symbolic gesture, bust through the flimsy barrier, reclaim her road, and show everyone she couldn't be stopped. It was a terrible, terrible miscalculation. She hit the old gate at probably 40 miles per hour. The cheap metal tubing crumpled like a soda can, just as she expected, but she lost control on the torn-up dirt and gravel of the construction site. The SUV fishtailed wildly. For a horrifying second, it looked like she was going to plow into Big Mike's crew, but instead, the car veered sharply to the right and smashed head-on into one of the massive, newly poured concrete pillars that would support the new gate. The sound was sickening, a deafening crunch of crumpling metal, shattering plastic, and breaking glass. The front end of the $100,000 BMW folded in on itself like an accordion. The airbag deployed with a loud thump. Steam and smoke billowed from under the mangled hood. Silence. Big Mike's entire crew just stopped what they were doing and stared, jaws agape. One of them let out a long, low whistle. The handful of remaining buyers stood frozen in shock. I had been watching from the porch, and I already had my phone out recording. I walked calmly down my driveway, across the lawn, and stopped a safe distance from the wreck. The driver's side door creaked open, and Cynthia stumbled out, coughing from the airbag dust, a trickle of blood on her forehead. Her white pantsuit was smudged with grease and dirt. She looked at her destroyed vehicle, then at the unyielding concrete pillar it was wrapped around, and then at me. You did this," she screamed, her voice hoarse. I just kept recording. "Looks like you've got a bit of a problem there, Cynthia," I said, my voice as calm as a summer evening. "You are once again trespassing on my private property." And this time, I added, gesturing to the slight chip her bumper had made in the corner of the massive pillar, "It looks like you've damaged my new wall. I'll be sure to send you the bill." The remaining buyers didn't even say goodbye. They just got in their cars, their faces pale, and drove away as fast as they could. Her grand opening weekend ended not with a pop of champagne corks, but with the wail of a tow truck and a sheriff's deputy writing her a ticket for reckless driving and trespassing. Her beautiful BMW, her symbol of status and power, was hauled away, a mangled wreck. The wall, however, stood unblemished. The aftermath of Cynthia's spectacular self-destruction was swift and brutal. The image of her wrecked BMW wrapped around my concrete pillar became the talk of the county. The tow truck driver was a gossip, and the story was all over town before the sun set. Her carefully constructed image of a savvy, successful developer was shattered. What was left was the reality. A desperate, unstable woman who literally crashed and burned when she didn't get her way. The wall was finished the next day. Big Mike and his crew hoisted the new gate into place. It was a masterpiece of over-engineering. A solid slab of black steel that slid silently open and closed at the touch of a button on the heavy-duty remote I now kept in my truck. It was impassable, impenetrable, and beautiful. Cynthia was served with a citation for trespassing, another for destruction of property, my pillar, and a bill from my lawyer for the initial damage to the gate she'd cut. But those were the least of her worries. The lawsuits from her own clients started to pour in. The handful of people who had bought in Phase 1, seduced by the promise of that exclusive Ranch View access road, now found themselves with no such access. They had been sold a lie and they were furious. Their lawyers cited fraud and breach of contract. Her own lawyer, seeing the mountain of evidence against her and the sheer lunacy of her recent actions, dropped her as a client. The bank, getting wind of the fraud lawsuits and the failure of the Phase 2 launch, called in her loans. She was financially hemorrhaging, and the tourniquet she'd been counting on, new sales, was gone. Through Eddie the mailman, I heard she was planning one last, desperate gambit. She had managed to get herself on the agenda for the upcoming town hall meeting. The topic was listed as addressing community development and infrastructure needs. It was a thinly veiled attempt to make a public appeal, to rally whatever support she had left and try to pressure the town council to intervene on her behalf, to somehow declare my road public after the fact. It was a Hail Mary pass, and I decided to be the one to intercept it. I spent the next few days in my office, not on the ranch. I made dozens of copies of every piece of evidence I had. The packet I put together was damning. Page 1 was a high-quality copy of my original 1940 deed. Page 2 was the official county survey map, with my property lines and private road clearly marked. Page 3 was the glossy Willow Creek Estates brochure, with the fraudulent Ranch View access road circled in red. The following pages were a collection of photographs: the cut chain, the BMW tire tracks, the wrecked car, my completed wall. The final page was a copy of the bill I'd sent her for the damage to my concrete pillar. I made 50 of these packets. The night of the town hall meeting, the main hall was packed. It was standing room only. It seemed everyone in Liberty Crossing wanted to see the final act of this drama. Cynthia's few remaining supporters, mostly other real estate agents who benefited from her development, were in the front row. Behind them were the angry homeowners who'd bought from her, their faces grim. The rest of the room was filled with curious townsfolk, fellow ranchers who'd come in solidarity, and of course the Channel 8 news crew, who smelled a much juicier follow-up story. Cynthia, looking haggard but defiant in another power suit, took the podium. She tried to project an aura of wounded reasonableness. She spoke about her vision for a vibrant, growing Liberty Crossing. She talked about synergy and shared resources. She painted herself as a forward-thinking entrepreneur being stonewalled by one selfish, backward-thinking individual who refused to share a little-used dirt track. She was trying to reframe the narrative one last time, to make this about community spirit versus individual greed. All we are asking, she concluded, her voice trembling with what she probably hoped sounded like passion, is for the town to recognize the long-standing public nature of this access and to work with us to create a solution that benefits all residents, new and old. There was a smattering of polite applause from her claque in the front row. The mayor looked out at the silent, tense crowd. "Thank you, Mrs. Bradshaw. Is there a response from the floor?" I stood up from my seat in the back. I didn't walk to the podium. I wanted to speak from among my neighbors. As I rose, I gave a small nod to Sarah, my brother, and a few friendly ranchers I'd enlisted. They immediately began moving through the aisles, quietly handing one of my prepared packets to every single person in the room. "Ma'am," I began, my voice calm but carrying easily through the suddenly silent hall. "You've said a lot of nice-sounding words. Community, synergy, progress. But the word you seem to be avoiding tonight is truth." Cynthia's face tightened. A low murmur went through the crowd as people began opening the packets. "The truth," I continued, holding up my own copy, "is that you are not a visionary. You are a fraud." The murmur grew louder. The news camera, which had been on Cynthia, swung around to face me, In your hands, I told the crowd, you will find the truth. You'll find a copy of the deed to my family's ranch, which proves my ownership of that land since 1940. You'll find the official county survey map, which shows that road has never, not for one day in its existence, been a public easement. And then, I said, holding up the glossy brochure for all to see, you will find this. This is the lie you've been selling. This is Mrs. Bradshaw's marketing material, where she knowingly and illegally advertised my private property as an exclusive amenity to trick people into buying her houses. The homeowners who had been swindled were now staring at the brochure in their hands, then up at Cynthia, their faces masks of cold fury. The reporter from Channel 8 was practically vibrating with excitement. This was never about sharing, I said, my voice ringing with conviction. This was about a desperate woman drowning in debt who built a business on a lie, and when she got called on it, she resorted to harassment, destruction of property, and slander. She is the one who is anti-community. She is the one who has disturbed the peace of this town. As I finished speaking, a side door to the hall opened. 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies and a man in a suit, a detective from the county's financial crimes unit, stepped inside. They hadn't come for me. They walked with purpose down the center aisle, straight toward the podium where Cynthia stood, her face chalk white, looking like a statue. Several of the defrauded homeowners had done more than just hire lawyers. They had filed criminal complaints, and the district attorney's office had acted fast. The detective didn't mince words. He stopped directly in front of her. "Cynthia Bradshaw," he said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence of the hall. "You're under arrest for multiple counts of felony wire fraud and deceptive trade practices." One of the deputies stepped behind her and pulled her hands behind her back. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs being fastened was the loudest sound in the room. Then the news camera's flash went off, a series of bright, brutal pops, capturing her humiliation for the world to see. Cynthia finally broke. She started screeching, a wild, cornered animal sound, a torrent of denials and threats about the army of lawyers she no longer had. The deputies led her away, still shrieking, past the glares of the people she'd cheated and the cold, unflinching lens of the news camera. And I just stood there, at the back of the hall, leaning against the wall. It wasn't my wall, not the one made of concrete and steel, but in that moment, it felt just as solid, just as satisfying. I had won. In the end, Cynthia Bradshaw's empire crumbled to dust, buried under an avalanche of civil lawsuits and facing serious criminal charges. She declared bankruptcy. The bank foreclosed on the half-finished Willow Creek estates. The development sat like a ghost town for over a year, a monument to her greed, before a reputable local developer bought the whole mess for pennies on the dollar at auction. The first thing the new owner did was come to my ranch, hat in hand. He introduced himself, apologized for the trouble his predecessor had caused, and assured me he would be a good neighbor. He even paid to have the ugly Willow Creek sign taken down and replaced with something more tasteful. The wall is still there. It's become a bit of a local landmark, a quiet testament to the fact that in Texas, a man's land is his own. Dolly, my prize heifer, made a full recovery from her ordeal and gave birth to a strong, healthy bull calf that I named Justice. The rhythm of the ranch returned. The peace and quiet I had fought so hard for settled back over the fields and the creek. Sometimes, late in the evening, I'll sit on the porch with Sarah, listening to the lowing of the cattle as they settle in for the night, and I'll look out toward the spot where the wall stands, unseen in the darkness. It cost a fortune, but it bought back my peace of mind. And that is priceless. They say good fences make good neighbors, but sometimes you need a 12-foot concrete wall to make a felon. If you enjoyed this pro-revenge, hit like and subscribe for more stories from the ranch. Share this with anyone dealing with an HOA tyrant. Have you ever had a neighbor from hell? Tell me all about it in the comments below.